In April 1841, Silas Rutledge stunned even the most calloused plantation owners in South Carolina with a staggering announcement. He was placing his daughter, Catherine, a 28-year-old woman weighing over 260 pounds, under the complete authority of an enslaved man named Ezekiel Cross. Not as a caretaker, not as a servant, but as her master in every way except on paper. The white elite of Colleton County were appalled, but they had no clue about Rutledge's true motives or what Ezekiel would do to Catherine in the months ahead. By November, Catherine's body had transformed in ways no one could comprehend. 13 men were dead, and Cypress Grove Plantation was nothing but ash. What truly unfolded between that enslaved man and the plantation owner's daughter? What did he do that left witnesses trembling with fear? Before we uncover this chilling truth, subscribe, hit the bell, and comment your state below. Now, let's step back to where it all began. Spring in Colleton County brought stifling heat and humidity so thick the air felt like a wall. The Combahee River slithered through the low country, its dark waters reflecting Spanish moss draped over live oaks like mourning shrouds. Rice fields stretched endlessly, their flooded expanses worked by hundreds of enslaved people, wading knee-deep from dawn to dusk. This was wealth forged from torment, prosperity carved from human despair, all justified by men who saw cruelty as the natural order. Cypress Grove Plantation sprawled across 800 acres of moderately fertile land. Its owner, Silas Rutledge, was not quite among the county's elite, but craved their status. He owned 58 enslaved people, making him wealthy by most measures, yet barely mid-tier in local society. The true powerhouses held thousands of acres and hundreds of slaves, summering in Charleston and educating their sons in northern universities. Their names carried weight that could open doors or ruin lives with a whisper. Silas had married Elizabeth Yancey in 1812, a practical union that brought modest land and a respected name. Elizabeth, more focused on ledgers than social climbing, died in 1813, giving birth to Catherine. For 28 years, Silas raised her alone while obsessing over breaking into the county's inner circle. Tall and gaunt, his premature gray hair gave him a stern look that matched his cold demeanor. In business, he was shrewd but kept his word, a man who drove hard bargains yet honored them. Catherine grew up isolated, taught by tutors, never truly belonging. By 1841, at 28, she weighed nearly 260 pounds, her body bloated from years of medications for hysteria and female nervous disorders. She suffered violent fits, screaming and hurling objects. The previous year, she attacked Silas with a letter opener, scarring his left hand. Colleton's white society whispered about her with false pity. Poor Silas, burdened with a mad daughter, such a shame for a once pretty child.
They didn't know the truth, that Catherine's madness was no illness, but a rational response to living among monsters. On April 7th, a letter arrived by private courier. Silas opened it in his study, expecting routine business. Instead, he found 3 pages on fine paper, sealed with red wax, bearing a scythe crossed with wheat stalks, the mark of the Brethren of the Harvest. This secret society of 13 men met in shadows, performing rituals they believed enriched the land through blood sacrifice, blending old European traditions with spiritual knowledge stolen from enslaved people. They held that the strong must consume the weak, sometimes literally. Silas joined in 1822, attending some 40 gatherings over 19 years, engaging in acts from unsettling to depraved. The letter revealed his $12,000 debt from gambling and failed ventures, an impossible sum. Repayment meant selling his land and slaves, dismantling his world. But the Brethren offered an alternative, a public act of loyalty. Silas must place Catherine under an enslaved man's total control for a year, announcing it to the county's elite as a drastic treatment for her condition. The humiliation would be profound in a society that prized white women's protection. In return, his debt would be erased, and the Brethren would fund his social ascent. Silas sat in his study, weighing ruin against sacrificing his daughter's dignity. Society had conditioned him to choose power over morality, property over people. At candlelight, he wrote his acceptance and sent it before dawn. 3 days later, another letter arrived with a name. Ezekiel Cross, 33, recently purchased from a Virginia plantation. Skilled in carpentry and herbal medicine, described as quiet and compliant. Unbeknownst to Silas, Ezekiel's placement was deliberate, chosen for this role, driven by a burning need for justice and the patience to wait for the perfect moment. Ezekiel arrived April 13th in a wagon driven by a trader named Henderson. Unusually, it stopped at the main house. Silas met them on the porch, squinting into the morning sun. Ezekiel sat in the wagon, his direct gaze unsettling Silas, who was used to averted eyes from enslaved people. Ezekiel, tall at 6'2", broad-shouldered, lean from labor, had unscarred skin and precise hands that hinted at skilled work. Henderson handed over papers. Ezekiel Cross, as requested, carefully selected. Silas barely glanced at them. "You understand why you're here?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Ezekiel replied, his deep voice steady with a Virginia accent. "My daughter is unwell. You'll manage her care. Doctors failed. You know herbal treatments?" "My grandmother was a healer, sir. She taught me." The deal was swift. Ezekiel was given a cabin near the house, separate from other quarters, and told his sole duty was Catherine's care, with severe consequences for failure. Alone in his cabin, Ezekiel's expression softened. He unwrapped a cloth bundle, revealing a worn paper with 3 names in a child's scrawl: Sarah, Benjamin, and Ruth, his wife, son, and daughter, sold 3 years ago to an Alabama plantation known for brutality. They died within 18 months. Sarah from fever, Benjamin from infection, Ruth from despair at 6, refusing food. Silas had sold them, not for need, but to prove his ruthlessness to the brethren, splitting a family to show his resolve. Ezekiel had spent 2 years moving south, sold from plantation to plantation, gathering whispers about the brethren, their rituals, their untouchable arrogance. When the chance came to be sold to Rutledge, he seized it, gaining access to Silas's world and vulnerabilities. Justice, he knew, came not from laws but from patience and becoming as monstrous as necessary. He tucked the paper away and began plotting. On April 14th, a house slave named Judith, graying and cautious, led Ezekiel to Catherine's room. A crash echoed from within, followed by Catherine's slurred, venomous voice, "No more treatments!" Judith sighed, warning of her bad days. Ezekiel entered alone, closing the door behind him. The room was dim, curtains drawn, air thick with stale bedding and the sickly sweet rot of mercury. Catherine sat by a cold fireplace, hair tangled, face swollen, hands trembling. She glared, confused, then furious. "Who are you? No more doctors." "I'm not a doctor, miss. I'm Ezekiel. Your father sent me to help." Her laugh was harsh, bitter. "Help. They mean poison, chains, silence." She stood, swaying unsteadily. "He's punishing me for remembering, for speaking, for refusing to forget." Ezekiel stayed calm, non-threatening. "What are you supposed to forget?" The question caught her off guard, her anger flickering to vulnerability. "You don't know." "I know nothing, miss. Only that you're unwell." She studied him, eyes narrowing. "You're not from here." "Virginia, miss." "Do you know what happens in this house? In the cellar?" Ezekiel's pulse quickened, but he kept his face neutral. "I don't know what you mean." "Liar," she said, exhaustion replacing heat. "Everyone lies. It's easier than truth." Ezekiel moved to the window, pulling open the heavy curtains. Sunlight flooded in. Catherine cried out, shielding her eyes. "When did you last go outside, miss?" "I can't walk that far. I'm too weak." "When did you eat without laudanum?" "The medicine's necessary. Doctors say so." "What if they're wrong? What if everything you're told is designed to keep you controllable, not cured? What if your father's been poisoning you for years to silence what you saw?" Silence fell. Catherine's eyes widened, her trembling hands stilled. For a moment, she just stared, mind working. "He told you?" "Your father told me nothing, miss. But I see mercury poisoning, long-term laudanum. Healthy women don't become this without intent. It's a trick." I can make you well, clear-minded, strong enough to leave this room, but it'll be painful, and your father won't approve. Why would you help me? Ezekiel met her gaze, steady and unflinching. Because I want Silas Rutledge to suffer. The best way is to give him a daughter sane enough to remember everything, and strong enough to speak it. Truth was a risk, but Catherine wasn't fooled by manipulation. She'd see through lies. Shared purpose might earn her trust. You want revenge on my father? Yes, miss. He sold my family, my wife, my son, my daughter, to their deaths, just to prove his cruelty to others. Catherine absorbed this, then nodded slowly. The brethren. He sold them for the brethren. Not a question. You don't know. She said, her laugh edged with mania. You'll learn. Everyone does eventually. She leaned forward, voice low. If I agree, if I let you help me, what happens then? You get well, miss, and when you're well, we decide what to do next. I have my revenge to plan. You have yours. Perhaps they align. Her eyes glittered dangerously. I want them all dead. My father, Judge Pelham, Reverend Crenshaw, every man who stood in that cellar. I want them to suffer first, to know it's coming, to beg, then die. The venom was shocking, not for its intensity, but for its clarity from someone dismissed as mad. This was rage, distilled by years of suppression. Ezekiel nodded. Then we have an understanding, Miss Catherine. If we're conspirators, call me Catherine. I can't, miss, not where others might hear. We must be careful. Then know this, Ezekiel, she said, her voice sharp. I've killed before. 3 house slaves who might have told my father about my lucid moments. I don't remember how, laudanum blurs it, but I know I did it. They disappeared. Their families were told they ran away. Her smile was chilling. So if you plan to betray me, no, I'm not a victim. I'm something worse. Ice ran down Ezekiel's spine. He had expected an ally, not someone whose capacity for violence might surpass his own. But he held steady. I believe you, miss. I won't betray you. Good. One condition. When this is over, when we've had our revenge, I want to die. I can't live with what I've seen and done. You'll help me with that too. Ezekiel hadn't expected this, but he was committed. Agreed. Catherine extended her hand. After a moment, he shook it, her grip stronger than he anticipated. Over the next week, Ezekiel began her treatment. He reduced her laudanum gradually, substituting valerian root for anxiety, chamomile for digestion, milk thistle to cleanse her liver of toxins. The withdrawal was brutal. 3 days of fever, vomiting, and shaking. Ezekiel stayed by her side, holding basins, wiping her face with cool cloths, speaking softly to remind her she wasn't alone. When the worst passed, she was frail but clearer-headed than she'd been in years. Her tremors lessened, her speech sharpened. She could focus on books again. Then the real work started. Ezekiel had her walk short distances, room to hallway and back. Exhausting but necessary. He adjusted her diet, replacing heavy pastries with lean meats and vegetables, limiting portions despite her protests. Years of using food for comfort, making it hard. As her body strengthened, they talked. Catherine described what she saw at 12 in the cellar, details that turned Ezekiel's stomach. She recounted years of gaslighting, Silas convincing everyone, even her, that her memories were delusions. She revealed a hidden journal, pages coded with dates, names, and sounds from below that shouldn't exist. Ezekiel shared his family's story. Sarah's songs while working, teaching their children to read despite the danger. Benjamin's knack for math at 8, astonishing overseers. Ruth's love for wildflowers decorating their cabin. He told how Silas came to their Virginia plantation, inspecting them like cattle, agreeing to buy all 3, then splitting them at the last moment, taking Sarah and the children, leaving Ezekiel behind, smiling as he did it. That's what I remember most, Ezekiel said quietly. My son clinging to me, crying. Sarah trying to be strong, and your father smiled like their pain pleased him. Catherine listened, her newly clear eyes steady. I'm sorry. I know it's just a word, but I'm sorry you suffered because of what my father is. You're not responsible for him, miss. No, but I'm responsible for what I do next. And I promise you, Ezekiel, he'll pay for what he took from you. They all will. The formal announcement was set for April 29th. 41 of Colleton County's elite gathered in Cypress Grove's dining room for what invitations called a significant family matter. Judge Pelham arrived with his wife, Eleanor. Reverend Crenshaw brought his daughter. Marcus Fanning came with his family. Benjamin Lyle, the banker, attended alone. The meal was lavish. Oysters, roasted duck, rice dishes, sweet potatoes, fresh bread, a towering cake for dessert. Catherine sat at her father's right, eating sparingly, speaking only when addressed. Ezekiel served alongside other house slaves, moving silently, refilling glasses, clearing plates, invisible to most, but absorbing every word, every glance. After dessert, Silas stood, tapping his glass. My friends, thank you for joining us. As you know, Catherine has been unwell for years. We've tried every treatment, doctors from Charleston, a specialist from Philadelphia. Nothing worked until recently. He gestured to Ezekiel. 2 weeks ago, I brought in Ezekiel, skilled in herbal medicine. As you see, Catherine is much improved, clearer, calmer, more herself than in years. Polite murmurs rippled through the room. Catherine kept her face neutral, but Ezekiel saw her knuckles whiten on the napkin beneath the table. Silas continued, This progress has led to a difficult decision. Catherine needs ongoing care beyond our household's means.
After much thought, I've decided Ezekiel will take full responsibility for her welfare, her treatment, daily activities, and living arrangements effective immediately. The murmurs shifted to confusion, then shock. Guests exchanged glances. Mrs. Pelham's face betrayed dismay. Marcus Fanning spoke up. Silas, I don't follow. You're placing your daughter under a slave's care? Permanently? I'm placing her with someone who succeeded where others failed. Her health outweighs social convention. Reverend Crenshaw interjected cautiously. Surely there are other options, a companion, a nurse, someone more suitable. Silas's expression hardened. My decision is made. Catherine agrees. Don't you, daughter? All eyes turned to her. This was her chance to refuse, to expose everything, to bring it all down. Instead, she smiled, small, controlled, revealing nothing. I trust my father's judgment. Ezekiel has been kind. His treatments help. I'm content with this arrangement. Her words were perfect, but Ezekiel saw the rage in her eyes, the white-knuckled grip on her napkin. She was playing the obedient daughter, but inside she was screaming. The evening dragged on in strained conversation. Some guests left early. Others stayed, pulling Silas aside to voice their concerns. Ezekiel caught fragments. Is this wise? What will people say? The brethren won't approve of this going public. Judge Pelham's low voice near the study carried that last warning. Silas's reply was too quiet to hear, but Pelham nodded, clapping his shoulder. By midnight, the guests were gone. Catherine retired to her room. Silas retreated to his study. Ezekiel helped clean, then slipped upstairs, knocking softly on Catherine's door. Come in, she called. She sat by the window, still in her dinner dress, staring into the dark grounds. It's done, then. I'm officially your responsibility. Property of property. How absurd. How are you feeling, miss? I want to burn this house down with everyone in it. But we must be patient, yes? Yes, miss. She turned to him. Did you see their faces? The disgust, the pity. They think I'm pathetic. They have no idea what we're planning. And what are we planning, miss? Catherine opened her dresser, pulling out a wooden box filled with papers in her coded handwriting. I've documented everything I remember. Dates, names, rituals, coded to look like nonsense if found.
but I can decode it. We could destroy 20 men with this. Will anyone believe us? A woman labeled mad and an enslaved man? No, which is why we need undeniable proof. She showed a specific page. The Brethren keeps a ledger in a hidden cellar room recording every ritual, every sacrifice, every member's role. It ensures they're all guilty. My father mentioned it years ago, before he realized I'd remember. Where's this ledger? In the cellar, beyond the main chamber. I never saw inside, but I heard them talk. That's where they keep what they can't lose.
Such a ledger could ruin them. But reaching it meant entering their sanctum. We'd need to move when the house is quiet. My father goes to Charleston monthly. His next trip is May 14th, gone 3 days. That gives us 2 weeks to prepare. Catherine's voice was steady, resolute. I've been thinking about this for 16 years. I know every step. They spent an hour whispering details. Catherine sketched the cellar from memory, passages, hidden doors. Ezekiel asked about guards, keys, slave schedules. By 2 a.m. he left, mind racing. He was bound to a conspiracy with a woman brilliant, broken, and terrifying. In his cabin, he unfolded his family's names, Sarah, Benjamin, Ruth, staring at them by candlelight. I'm doing this for you, he murmured, for every soul crushed by men like Silas Rutledge, who think power justifies destruction. He blew out the candle, lying in darkness, listening to the house settle. Below, in a cellar he'd never seen, lay secrets that could shatter South Carolina's elite. In 2 weeks, he'd go after them. The next 2 weeks passed in deceptive calm. Catherine's health improved steadily. Her weight dropped, her mind sharpened, her steps grew stronger. She decoded journal sections, revealing the Brethrens' horrors, not just a Colleton County cabal, but part of a southern network with branches in Charleston, Savannah, New Orleans, Richmond. Different names, same structure. Wealthy men who believed their dominance came from ancient rites of sacrifice, blending European occultism with enslaved people's stolen spiritual practices. They think they're continuing traditions thousands of years old, Catherine explained one afternoon. They twist it into something monstrous, justifying acts with no excuse. She spoke of sacrifices, sometimes animals, often people no one would miss, lone slaves, vagrant whites, even a child, though she wasn't sure if that was literal. Where do the bodies go? Swamps on every plantation. Alligators take care of the rest. The ledger, she said, recorded it all, 40 years of names, dates, rituals, ensuring no member could betray without dooming themselves. May 14th arrived. Silas left for Charleston at dawn, taking his carriage and manservant, expected back on the 16th. They waited until nightfall, the house settling into silence at 10 p.m. They met in her room, her dressed in dark, practical clothes, hair tied back tightly, ready for action. Are you certain, miss? He asked, his voice low. I've been more certain, she replied, eyes fierce. They crept to the kitchen, where a hidden panel concealed the cellar door. It clicked open, revealing steep, creaking stairs descending into darkness. The air grew heavy with damp earth, old smoke, and a faint, putrid decay. Catherine noticed Ezekiel's reaction. You never get used to the smell, she said grimly. They descended carefully, Ezekiel's shuttered lantern casting faint light.
The cellar was vast, 30 feet square, low-ceilinged, supported by thick beams. The dirt floor and weeping stone walls framed a central altar, a heavy wooden table with dark stains and carved grooves that told a grim story. Candle holders, sealed clay jars, wooden boxes, and a rack of crimson-trimmed black robes lined the room. Shelves held books and papers. Catherine moved with precision, leading Ezekiel to a seemingly solid wall. She pressed a specific stone, and a section swung inward, revealing a smaller chamber, 10 feet square. At its center, on a wooden stand, sat the ledger. Massive, leather-bound, metal-clasped, flanked by smaller journals. Shelves held jars Ezekiel refused to examine closely. There, Catherine whispered, pointing. Ezekiel opens the ledger carefully. Thick parchment pages bore meticulous handwriting. Names, dates, Rituals from 1800 onward described with clinical precision, like experiments, not atrocities. At least 37 murders, enslaved people, poor whites, indigenous victims, consumed in rituals to feed the land. Ezekiel's horror deepened with each entry. He found his family in October 1838. 3 lines noting Sarah, Benjamin, and Ruth's sailed Alabama for resolve. "We need to take this," he said, voice tight with rage. "No," Catherine countered, her hand on his arm. "We steal it, alerts them immediately. We copy the key entries first." She was right, but Ezekiel burned to destroy it all. Revenge required patience, outsmarting the enemy. They worked for 3 hours, Catherine transcribing rituals, naming current members, Ezekiel listing victims for potential cross-referencing. The content was harrowing. Ezekiel paused often, hands shaking. Catherine once fled the chamber, overwhelmed by memories, but they persisted, building their case page by page. They didn't hear footsteps until a bright lantern flared in the outer chamber. Silas stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 men, 4 more behind in the main cellar. "Impressive," he said calmly. "I didn't think you'd find this room." Catherine stood between Ezekiel and her father. "You were supposed to be in Charleston." "I was, but I never trusted your sudden recovery. I left this morning, returned this afternoon, and watched the house all evening." She accused him of poisoning her for 16 years. "You expect me to accept that?" "I expect you to understand it was necessary. You saw something at 12 you shouldn't have. I couldn't let you destroy everything. I watched you murder a woman and eat her flesh. That wasn't madness, Father. That was a sane response to evil." Evil, such a simple word. Silas stepped closer, eyes flicking between them. "And you, Ezekiel, using my daughter to get to me, filling her head with revenge?" Ezekiel said nothing, calculating odds, 7 men against 1, Catherine unfit to fight. Silas gestured. "Bring them upstairs."
We need to discuss what happens next. They were locked in Silas's windowless study, a single high transom out of reach, the heavy oak door bolted. Alone, Catherine moved to Ezekiel. "Are you hurt?" "No, miss, but we're in deep trouble." "Not as much as you think." She pulled the copied papers from her dress. "He didn't search me." Too arrogant. "That won't help if we're dead." "We won't die tonight," she said, eyes calculating. "My father will avoid killing me if he can. I'm his blood. That's leverage." Over the next hour, voices and footsteps filled the hall, the brethren assembling. The door opened. Marcus Fanning stood there, face grim. "They're ready. Come peacefully or you'll be harmed." They were led back to the cellar, now transformed. All 13 brethren members stood in crimson-trimmed robes, candles blazing, the altar draped in red. 13 chairs formed a circle, all occupied except Silas's at the altar's head. Ezekiel and Catherine stood in the center, facing him. Silas removed his hood. "Brothers of the harvest, thank you for coming on short notice. We face a crisis. My daughter and her ally found our inner chamber, saw the ledger, were copying entries." Judge Pelham spoke. "Then they must be silenced permanently." Silas raised a hand. "My daughter is blood. I won't dispose of her without exploring options. And this man offers opportunity." "What opportunity?" Reverend Crenshaw asked. "To test a theory that anyone can be drawn into our work if framed correctly." Silas turned to Ezekiel. "You want revenge for your family. I understand. But what if I offered a different revenge, a meaningful one?" "I don't follow," Ezekiel said cautiously. "Join us as an associate. Not equal, but enough to attend rituals. In exchange, I'll give you resources to destroy Edward Gaines, the Alabama planter who killed your family. He's not brethren, unprotected." The offer was obscene. Join the monsters to punish another? "And if I refuse? You and Catherine die tonight. Your bodies go to the swamp, your papers burn. Everything continues as always." Silas spread his hands. "But if you accept, you live, Catherine lives, you get revenge. All it costs is your soul." Ezekiel glanced at Catherine. She shook her head slightly. "Don't become them," she whispered.
But Ezekiel considered accepting, not to join, but to infiltrate, gather evidence, buy time. What happens to her? She returns to her room, resumes medication, forgets what she's seen. Or she dies with you. Catherine's voice cut through. I won't forget again. I won't be silenced. Kill me, Father, but I'll never pretend I don't know what you are. Silas's face hardened. Then you've chosen. Wait, Ezekiel said. I accept, but Catherine goes free, not to her room, free, to leave South Carolina with money to start over. If you agree, I'll join. Brethren members muttered dissent, but Judge Pelham nodded. The girl's broken. Who'd believe her?
But a man willing to join us, despite hating us, that proves our power. Silas considered, then agreed. Catherine leaves tomorrow for Philadelphia with a new identity and stipend, dead to everyone here. Ezekiel nodded. Catherine glared, but he caught her eye, signaling trust. She left at dawn in a closed carriage. Ezekiel watched from his cabin, knowing she hadn't gone far. Her final glance promised he understood his strategy wasn't surrender. For 3 weeks, Ezekiel endured the longest days of his life. Overseers shadowed him constantly, barring him from leaving the plantation. He was assigned menial tasks, pointless work to fill time, but granted access to the main house, Silas's study, and the cellar, where the next gathering loomed. They were testing him, watching for escape attempts or sabotage. Ezekiel played the defeated man, compliant, silent, causing no trouble, but he observed everything. House routines, slave loyalties, overseer cruelty, frequent brethren visitors. He built a mental map, seeking weaknesses. At night, alone, he grappled with what lay ahead. His initiation would demand participation in their rituals, something horrific to make him complicit, ensuring he could never expose them without damning himself. He wrestled with his limits, what acts he'd refuse even for revenge, and whether any deed was too monstrous to justify justice. He had no clear answers. On June 2nd, the night before his initiation, Silas visited his cabin after midnight. Ezekiel woke to knocking and opened the door to find Silas alone. "May I come in?" Ezekiel stepped aside. Silas surveyed the sparse room, then spoke. "Tomorrow you join us, not fully, but enough. Do you understand what that means?" "I understand what I agreed to." "Do you?" The Brethren has stood for 43 years, never exposed, never betrayed. Why? Because we're all guilty, but also because we protect each other. Join us and doors open. Business, legal favors, enemies crushed. We're a network of power across the South. As an associate, you'll have resources beyond imagination. In exchange, I help you murder. Silas didn't flinch. You help maintain the natural order. Strong over weak, powerful over powerless. That's how the world works. We embrace it. You killed my family to prove that order. I did, and I'd do it again. Sentiment is weakness. Love is weakness. Caring for individuals over power is how you lose. Silas leaned forward. But your family's gone. Nothing changes that. You can make their deaths mean something. Use our power to spare others their fate. Advocate for better conditions from within. It was almost persuasive, a trap cloaked in reformist ideals. Ezekiel knew participation would compromise him, corrupt him. Why tell me this? Because I want you to succeed. You're more valuable as an ally than an enemy. I killed your family, but I don't want to kill you. Silas stood. Tomorrow you'll face a hard test. Do it without hesitation, without weakness.
Fail, and you and Catherine die. Yes, I know she's not in Philadelphia. She's hiding, planning her own revenge. My people are watching. If you falter, she's found and killed. Understand? Ezekiel's blood froze. Catherine was alive but hunted, her fate tied to his actions. I understand, he said quietly. Silas left without another word. Alone he sat in the dark, staring at his family's names by moonlight. Forgive me, he whispered, for what I must become. I swear it won't be for nothing. The gathering began at midnight, June 3rd. 2 Brethren members bound Ezekiel's hands, stripped him to the waist, and led him to the cellar. All 13 stood in robes, candles flickering, shadows dancing. Silas stood at the altar's head. Brothers of the harvest, tonight we conduct a unique initiation. We bring a man who hates us, who lost everything to us, to prove our power extends even to enemies. 2 members brought a bound, gagged, enslaved woman, 18 or 19, struggling weakly, to the altar. "This is your test, Ezekiel," Silas said. "Take the knife, make the first cut. Prove your desire for revenge against gains outweighs your moral qualms. Refuse and you die tonight." The brethren chanted low, rhythmic words in an unknown tongue. Silas offered a long, sharp knife, leather-wrapped. Ezekiel looked at the woman, her terrified eyes echoing Sarah, Benjamin, Ruth, every soul crushed by men like these. He looked at the knife, at Silas, at the 13 men watching. This was the moment. Become a monster or die resisting. But there was a third path, planned for 3 weeks, requiring perfect timing and absolute resolve. He took the knife. The brethren nodded approval. Silas smiled. Ezekiel stepped toward the altar. The woman's eyes widened in terror. He raised the knife and struck the nearest brethren member's throat. Blood sprayed. The man collapsed. Ezekiel tore off the man's robe, throwing it over candles, plunging half the room into darkness. Chaos erupted. He moved like vengeance incarnate, rage honed into action. He grabbed a man, using him as a shield against a swing, threw him into 2 others, kicked a knee, shattering bone, seized a candle holder, and smashed it into a face. The brethren were powerful but soft, unused to fighting. Ezekiel reached the altar, cut the woman's bones, and shouted, "Run!" She scrambled up the stairs. He turned to face 7 remaining members blocking the exit. "You've made a terrible mistake," Silas said, voice steady. "You've killed yourself and Catherine." "Maybe," Ezekiel replied, "but I'll take as many of you as I can." Unknown to him, Catherine hadn't gone to Philadelphia. She'd hidden in the slave quarters, recruiting 23 enslaved allies, men and women who'd lost children, friends, to the brethren's rituals. Armed with axes, scythes, hammers, they carried generations of rage. When the woman burst from the cellar, screaming, Catherine led them down. The brethren, grappling with Ezekiel, didn't hear until it was too late. The enslaved flooded the cellar, a tide of retribution. No mercy, no hesitation. Judge Pelham drew a pistol, but was struck down. Reverend Crenshaw begged, receiving nothing. Marcus Fanning tried to flee, but was dragged back. Silas, seeing his world collapse, grabbed Catherine, knife to her throat. "Stop, or I kill her." The room stilled. Catherine met his gaze, fearless. "Do it. It changes nothing. You've lost." She drove her elbow into his ribs, breaking free. Ezekiel faced Silas, the enslaved man against the master. "You took everything, my wife, my children, my life, for no reason but to prove your cruelty." "Please," Silas whispered, desperate. "Did my family beg? Did any of your victims?" Ezekiel shook his head. "No mercy for you. Never." The enslaved delivered brutal, final justice. Catherine stood amid the cellar's carnage, shaking not from fear, but from the release of 16 years of rage. Ezekiel approached. "Are you hurt?" "No," she said, voice steady. "You?" "Minor cuts, nothing serious." He surveyed the bodies. "What now?" "Now we burn it all," Catherine said, her smile grim. "The cellar, the ledger, the evidence. We destroy every trace." "That ledger could prove what they did," Ezekiel protested. "Justice?" She laughed bitterly. "This is justice, the only kind we'll get. If we take it to the authorities, we're hunted down. The Brethren's network will come for us. This ends only if Cypress Grove's chapter dies in an accident, with no evidence, no witnesses." Ezekiel knew she was right. They spent 2 hours preparing. The enslaved allies slipped away before dawn, returning to their plantations, sworn to silence for survival. Catherine and Ezekiel poured oil through the cellar, stacked wood, arranged bodies to suggest an accident. They placed the ledger and the journals on the altar. "Wait," Ezekiel said. He tore out his family's entry, folding it into his shirt. "For them, so they're not forgotten." Catherine nodded. She lit a candle and touched it to the oil-soaked wood. Flames roared to life. They fled upstairs, out to the yard, watching as fire consumed Cypress Grove. Dawn would bring questions, but they had a story, a tragic accident, a candle tipped in the cellar, Silas and his guests trapped. As the sun rose over the ruins, Catherine turned to Ezekiel. "What now?" He said, "I go west. Use the chaos to disappear, maybe build a network to help others escape. I'll go north. I've been stealing from my father's accounts for years. I'll start over, but I won't forget. I'll document everything, coded, hidden, for someone to find decades from now, when it can't hurt us. They'll dismiss it as they did you. Then I'll bury it deep. Truth finds a way." They watched the fire burn out, leaving only ash and blackened timbers.
Then they parted. Catherine north to Charleston, then Philadelphia. Ezekiel west to the frontier, where the enslaved could vanish into quiet communities. They never met again. The official story held, a tragic fire killed Silas, 12 prominent men, and Catherine at Cypress Grove. Funerals honored the men. Catherine was a sad footnote, presumed trapped in her room. No one questioned it. Enslaved allies, sold off within months, scattered, carrying their secret to their graves. Whispers persisted in slave quarters. Tales of justice at Cypress Grove, of a woman and man who toppled untouchable masters. In 1863, Union troops found tunnels, bones, and ritual markings, but moved on amid war. In 1971, a coded journal surfaced during demolition, detailing names, dates, rituals. Before decoding, it vanished. Some say destroyed, others say hidden by brethren descendants. A few believe it waits to be found. Ezekiel and Catherine became legend, their story enduring. Cruelty breeds consequences. The powerless wield memory's power. What do you think? Is that journal out there? Comment below. For dark historical mysteries, subscribe to the Holloway Archives, hit the bell, and share. These stories demand remembrance. See you next video.